New beginnings. The rain drummed against the towering windows of the Holbrook mansion as Vivian Cross stood on the marble steps, clutching her worn leather portfolio. Her reflection in the polished door showed a woman trying too hard to look confident tall. Hair pulled back severely, her only good blazer pressed to perfection. Green eyes betraying the anxiety she fought to hide. 3 months. That's how long it had been since Lincoln Elementary had restructured their art program. Leaving her without a job and scrambling to pay rent on her tiny studio apartment, a nanny position had seemed like a lifeline when she'd seen it posted. Online, live-in care for 1 child, excellent salary, immediate start. What she hadn't expected was the intimidating Gothic revival architecture looming before her, or the man who answered the door. Marcus Holbrook stood 6'2" with the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, his charcoal suit wrinkle-free, even after what she assumed had been a 14-hour workday. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard, storm gray and holding a depth of weariness that seemed to go beyond simple exhaustion. "Miss Cross." His voice was measured, professional. "You're punctual. Thank you for meeting with me so late, Mr. Holbrook. I know your schedule is demanding." He stepped aside to let her enter, and Vivian tried not to gape at the soaring ceilings. A crystal chandelier that probably cost more than her annual salary. Everything was pristine, elegant, and somehow deeply lonely. "Jamie is already asleep," Marcus said, leading her through hallways lined with abstract paintings that she recognized as genuine pieces worth small fortunes. "But you'll meet him in the morning. He's 8, struggles with traditional learning methods, and has been through 4 nannies in the past year." Vivian's heart clenched. "May I ask why the others didn't work out?" Marcus paused at the foot of a grand staircase, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. They couldn't handle his difficulties. "Jamie hasn't spoken much since his mother died 2 years ago. He's not defiant, just ... withdrawn. The school says he's falling behind academically." There was something in his tone, not just concern for his son, but a raw guilt that Vivian recognized all too well. She'd heard that same note in her own voice when talking about her students, the ones she felt she'd failed before the budget. Cuts made the decision for her. "Children process grief differently than adults," she said softly. "Sometimes silence is their way of protecting themselves until they feel safe again." Marcus looked at her sharply, as if surprised by her response. For a moment, his composed mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable underneath. Then it was back in place, professional and distant. "Your room is on the 2nd floor, next to Jamie's. Mrs. Chen, our housekeeper, will show you around tomorrow. Breakfast is at 7. Jamie's tutoring begins at 8. I leave for the office by 6:30 and rarely return before 8 in the evening. Do you have any questions?" Clinical efficiency of his words stung, but Vivian kept her expression neutral. "Just one. What does Jamie love to do? What makes him happy?" Marcus froze, his hand on the banister. The question seemed to catch him completely off guard. He stood there for a long moment, and Vivian realized with growing sadness that he didn't know the answer. He used to draw," he said finally, his voice quieter than before. Before everything changed. Walls began to crack 3 weeks into her position. Vivian had learned to navigate the rhythms of the Holbrook household. Mrs. Chen, kind woman in her 60s with knowing eyes, had become an unexpected ally, sharing whispered insights about Jamie's favorite foods and Marcus's forgotten meals left cold on his desk. Jamie was a puzzle wrapped in silence. He followed instructions without complaint, completed his schoolwork with mechanical precision, but never volunteered a word beyond yes or no, till the rainy Tuesday morning when Vivian found him in the sunroom, staring at a spider spinning its web in the corner of a window. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" Vivian said softly, settling beside him on the window seat. Jamie glanced at her, surprised. Most adults would have shooed the spider away. "I used to watch them in my classroom," Vivian continued. "Each web is like a piece of art, unique, delicate, purposeful. Do you think she knows how talented she is?" Something shifted in Jamie's expression. He shook his head, then whispered, "Daddy says spiders are just pests." It was the first time he'd volunteered anything personal. Vivian's heart raced, but she kept her voice calm. "What do you think? Jamie considered this seriously. I think she's making something beautiful because she has to, like breathing. That afternoon, Vivian quietly retrieved art supplies from her room sketchpads, colored pencils, watercolors she'd salvaged from her teaching days. She set them on Jamie's desk without comment, then began his math lesson as usual. Halfway through multiplication tables, she noticed his fingers drumming against his leg, his eyes drifting to the supplies. When she pretended to step out for water, she returned to find him sketching the spider's web with remarkable detail and an intensity that took her breath away. "Jamie," she said softly, "this is incredible." He froze, expecting to be scolded for the distraction. Instead, Vivian pulled up a chair beside him. "Would you like to learn about perspective? How to make the web look three-dimensional?" For the next hour, math was forgotten. Jamie absorbed every technique she showed him, his pencil moving with growing confidence. When they heard Marcus's key in the front door, usually early at 6 o'clock, Jamie quickly shoved the drawing into his desk drawer. "Jamie," Marcus's voice echoed from the foyer. "Where are you?" "Coming, Daddy," Jamie called, his voice brighter than Vivian had ever heard it. Marcus appeared in the doorway of the study, still in his tailored navy suit, but with his tie loosened and exhaustion written in the lines around his eyes. His gaze swept the room, taking in the scattered art supplies, smudges of graphite on Jamie's fingers, the guilty expressions they both wore. "What's all this?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Ms. Vivian was showing me about perspective," Jamie said quickly. "I finished my math first, I promise." Marcus's eyes met Vivian's over his son's head, and she saw something flicker. They're not anger, but confusion. As if he'd walked into a room where people were speaking a language he'd forgotten. "I see," he said finally. "Well, wash up for dinner." Jamie scampered off. Marcus stepped into the study, picking up one of the pencils. "I thought I made it clear that Jamie needs to focus on his academic subjects." "He did focus," Vivian replied, standing her ground. "He completed his math homework in record time once he had something to look forward to." Art isn't a distraction from learning, Mr. Holbrook. For some children, it's the key that unlocks everything else. Marcus set down the pencil, his jaw working. His mother used to say things like that. The words hung between them, heavy with grief, and something else Vivian couldn't quite identify. She watched him struggle with whatever memory her comment had triggered. "She was an artist," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Always saw beauty in things I couldn't understand. After she died, I packed away all her supplies. I thought it would be easier for Jamie if there weren't constant reminders." "And easier for you?" Vivian asked gently. Marcus looked up sharply, his gray eyes stormy. For a moment, she thought he might shut down completely, retreat behind his professional mask. Instead, something in his shoulders sagged. "I don't know how to be what he needs," he admitted. "I know business strategies and market analysis and how to close deals. I don't know how to help a little boy who draws spiders and misses his mother." Unexpected connections. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening when the power went out during a spring thunderstorm. Vivian found herself in the kitchen by candlelight, making hot chocolate for Jamie, who had appeared at her door frightened by the thunder. She was stirring marshmallows into the steaming mugs when Marcus walked in, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "The backup generator isn't working," he said, then paused, taking in the Sinjami. Curled in a kitchen chair with a blanket, Vivian ladling cocoa, the warm glow of candles softening the harsh lines of the modern space. "I've called the repair service, but they can't come until morning. Would you like some?" Vivian offered, gesturing to the pot. "There's plenty." Something about the informal setting, the forced pause from his constant connectivity, made Marcus nod. He slipped off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, the most casual she'd ever seen him. When Jamie didn't object to his father joining them at the kitchen island, Vivian saw surprise flicker across Marcus's face. "Daddy, look what I drew today," Jamie said suddenly, pulling out a sketch pad. In the candlelight, his latest artwork seemed to dance a detailed drawing of the mansion's garden in full bloom, complete with hidden creatures nestled among the flowers leaned closer, studying the image with an intensity that made Jamie fidget. This is how you see our garden. Jamie nodded. As Vivian says I have a gift for seeing things others miss. She's right, Marcus said quietly. And Vivian caught the wonder in his voice. Your mother would have loved this. The casual mention of Jamie's mother, the first time Vivian had heard Marcus speak of her without pain tightening his features, seemed to unlock something in the room. Jamie began chattering about his art techniques, and Marcus listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly hearing his son for, perhaps, the first time in years. When Jamie finally yawned and headed to bed, Marcus helped Vivian clean up in comfortable silence. She was drying the last mug when he spoke again. His mother was Rebecca Stone before we married. She kept her name professionally. She was a textile artist, sold her pieces in galleries across the country. His voice was soft, reminiscent. She used to say that art wasn't about creating pretty things, but about showing people how to see the world with wonder again. Vivian set down the mug carefully. She sounds remarkable. Marcus leaned against the counter candlelight, casting shadows across his face. We met at a charity auction where one of her pieces was being sold. I bid on it not because I understood art, but because I wanted an excuse to talk to her. She laughed when I told her that, said most people bought art for all the wrong reasons. And did she teach you to see it differently? Marcus was quiet for so long that Vivian wondered if she'd overstepped. Then he nodded slowly. She tried. But I was so focused on building the company, on providing for our future. I thought there would be time to learn later, to really understand what made her. Eyes light up when she found inspiration in the smallest things. Thunder rolled overhead, and in the flickering candlelight, Vivian saw the grief Marcus had been carrying alone for 2 years. It wasn't just the loss of his wife. She realized it was the regret over all the conversations they'd never had, the shared moments he'd postponed for a tomorrow that never came. I was engaged once, Vivian found herself saying. Daniel was a lawyer, very practical, very ... safe. He couldn't understand why I wanted to teach art instead of pursuing something more realistic. When I lost my job, he suggested it was a sign that I should grow up and find a real career. Marcus turned to face her fully. What happened? I realized he was asking me to become someone else entirely, someone who saw art as frivolous instead of essential. She wrapped her hands around her warm mug. I gave him back the ring. My brother. Thomas thought I was crazy. Daniel had money, stability, a 5-year plan, but I'd rather be broke and true to myself than wealthy and empty. Do you regret it? Vivian met his eyes in the candlelight. Not for a second, though I'll admit, taking this job felt like admitting defeat at first. I thought I was just babysitting for money until something better came along. And now, the question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Vivian felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of feelings she hadn't expected to develop. Now I think maybe I wasn't looking for the right kind of something better, she said softly. Maybe what I needed wasn't another job. Maybe it was a purpose, a family to belong to. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. Vivian, I need you to know what you've done for Jamie. The way you've brought him back to life. I can never repay that. You don't need to repay anything, she whispered. You just need to keep showing up. Keep seeing him the way you did tonight. The power flickered back on suddenly, flooding the kitchen with harsh fluorescent light that made them both blink and step apart. The spell of the candlelit intimacy was broken, but something fundamental had shifted between them in acknowledgement. Of connection neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed. When everything falls apart, the trouble began on a crisp October morning when Patricia Whitmore arrived unannounced. Marcus's former mother-in-law swept through the front door like a force of nature, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her designer coat immaculate despite the autumn wind. Vivian was helping Jamie with a watercolor painting in the sunroom when the doorbell chimed. Grandmother. Jamie's face lit up with genuine joy as he ran to embrace the elegant woman. But Patricia's sharp blue eyes were fixed on Vivian, taking, in the paint-stained apron, the casual intimacy of the art lesson. The way Jamie's hand slipped naturally into Vivian's when introducing her. "So you're the latest nanny," Patricia said, her smile perfectly polite and completely cold. "How... Refreshing to see someone so young taking an interest in my grandson's education." Over lunch, Patricia peppered Vivian with questions that felt more like an interrogation. Where had she studied? What were her qualifications? How long did she plan to stay? Each query was delivered with the practiced precision of someone accustomed to dismantling potential threats too. Her carefully ordered world. Marcus arrived home early, his face brightening when he saw his son laughing at something Patricia had said. But Vivian noticed the way his shoulders tensed, the way his smile became forced when Patricia suggested they speak privately in his study. "She doesn't like me," Vivian confided to Mrs. Chen later while preparing dinner. The housekeeper glanced around nervously before leaning closer. "Mrs. Whitmore loved Rebecca like her own daughter. She's been protective of Jamie since the accident, and of Mr. Marcus too, in her way." "Accident?" Vivian's blood chilled. "I thought Rebecca died of illness." Mrs. Chen's face went pale. "Oh no, miss. You didn't know?" Mrs. Rebecca died in a car crash. She was driving to pick up art supplies for a project when the storm hit. Mr. Marcus, he blames himself. He was supposed to go with her that day, but he had an important meeting." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Marcus's guilt, his aversion to Jamie's art supplies, the way he'd packed away his wife's materials. He wasn't just grieving. He was drowning in self-recrimination. That evening, after Patricia had retired to the guest room, Vivian found Marcus on the terrace overlooking the garden. He stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "She thinks you're taking advantage of the situation," he said without turning around. "Patricia believes you're using Jamie to get to me, to the family money." Vivian felt as if she'd been slapped. "And what do you think?" Marcus finally faced her, and she saw torment written across his features. "I think I've been selfish. I've let myself forget that you're an employee, that this is temporary. I've put you in an impossible position." "Marcus, that's not she's." "Right about one thing," he interrupted. "I looked into your background after she raised concerns. The teaching position you lost, it wasn't just budget cuts, was it?" Vivian's heart sank. She should have known this would surface eventually. "No," she admitted quietly. "There was an incident. A parent complained that I was showing favoritism to students from difficult backgrounds. The principal said it was easier to let me go than deal with the controversy." "What kind of favoritism?" "I stayed after school to help kids who didn't have support at home. I bought supplies for students whose families couldn't afford them. I advocated for children who were being overlooked because they didn't fit the traditional mold." Her voice grew stronger with conviction. "I refused to give up on them, even when the system did." Marcus studied her face in the moonlight. "Is that what you're doing here? Advocating for another overlooked child?" The question hung between them, loaded with doubt and pain. Vivian realized that Patricia's poison had worked. She'd planted seeds of suspicion that were now blooming in Marcus's mind. "If you have to ask that question," Vivian said, her voice breaking, "then you don't know me at all." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Vivian, wait. I need you to understand losing Rebecca nearly destroyed me. The guilt, the what dash, ifs, ... I can't go through that again. And Jamie, he's just started to heal. If this goes wrong, if you leave." "So you're ending this before it can begin?" she asked, turning back to face him. "You're so afraid of loss that you're willing to throw away what we could have." Marcus's face crumpled with anguish. "What we could have was built on a professional relationship that's become something else entirely. Patricia made me realize how unfair that is to you, to Jamie, to everyone. You deserve someone who can offer you a real future, not a broken widower who's afraid of his own shadow." The cruel irony wasn't lost on either of them. In trying to protect everyone he loved, Marcus was ensuring he'd lose them all. Vivian saw the fear behind his words, the way trauma had convinced him that love inevitably led to loss. "You're right about one thing," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I do deserve someone who isn't afraid to fight for what matters. I deserve someone brave enough to believe that love is worth the risk." As she walked away, leaving Marcus alone on the terrace with his ghosts and his guilt, Neither of them noticed Jamie watching from his bedroom window, his young heart breaking. As he witnessed the collapse of the family he'd just begun to hope was real.